Carla Tillman, one of the editors here at Ogden Publications. I'm going to talk about how to treat a significant wound in your poultry. So this happened to one of our little girls. Hello, everybody. Today we are talking about chicken health, and I'm going to talk to you about one of the ways in which this little girl, who's known as Wingless, was attacked by a hawk, and she did lose a wing. So she still has one wing. You can see here, fully feathered out. But this wing was essentially torn off. There are going to be some graphic pictures. I'll warn you before they happen. What I find interesting is after we helped heal her up, and I'm going to talk about how we healed her up, she completely feathered over where that wing used to be. So she still has a little bit of a shoulder here, and she grows new feathers all the time. So you can see in here where there used to be a shoulder, but she feathered over. She's a little pale today, but that's okay. She's sweet. Whoops, I lost your camera. She's a sweet little bantam, little Japanese bantam, little feathered feet. And she has a lot to say. She talked constantly through this whole process and even laid eggs. So I'm going to show you some images of what the wound originally looked like, and I'm going to talk about how we healed her right up. So now I'm going to show you what the wound originally looked like. I warn you again, this is a pretty graphic image. So this is what the wound looked like the day that it happened. So for any of you who are grossed out, look away. I'm pretty fascinated by this stuff. You can see that the humeral bone was broken off here, and that the wing itself was essentially deskinned and ripped off. So a hawk attacked, and then she managed to run away and hide in a corner of the coop where we found her. So this was the original wound that we found. This is the day that I'm going to show you, this is her bandaged up, and then I'm going to talk about what we did to start treating her. She even laid an egg this day. She laid an egg the next day, and then she didn't lay anymore for about a month, but then she started right up laying eggs again. She is a cheerful little girl and stayed alert and talkative through this whole process. She was kind of amazing. So what I did, and I talked to a vet who did not deal with chickens. Nobody in the town where I live at the time, Lawrence, Kansas, would treat chickens. But I did talk to a vet about dressing changes. And I do have a paramedic medical background, so I was pretty comfortable doing this myself. They recommended what are called wet to dry dressings, where you start with a saline-soaked gauze pad that you put next to the wound. And then you put a dry pad on top of that and wrap the whole thing in gauze. And then we used electrical tape because it's what we had to wrap around that. And the action that happens here is that the saline helps draw moisture, plasma that's leaking, any extra moisture away from the wound and then into the drier layer of dressing. So it creates this wicking action that keeps the wound moist, which you want at this stage, but also draws whatever is leaking out of the wound as kind of a natural body healing process out into the dry dressing. We also opted to use a bit of Neosporin. We wanted some bacterial action, antibacterial action going at that point, since this was such a raw, fresh wound. So we used electrical tape. Another image coming up. After several days of doing wet to dry dressings, the outer muscular tissue that had been exposed to the air began to dry out and desiccate, which we had expected and was normal. And at this point, we opted to stop using the Neosporin and to use medicinal honey instead. So I did go on the internet and do some research and talk to the vet once again, and then took them a present because they were very nice to help us out at all. And we used Manukora or Manuka honey, which is a honey, and I'm going to talk about the properties here in just a second, that is marketed as a medicinal honey. It's not been tested in humans a whole bunch. It has been used. It's been used by vets for a really long time as part of wound dressing. There are a couple of things in honey that are natural antimicrobials and antibacterials that occur naturally. There is some hydrogen peroxide in honey that works as an antimicrobial. There is also methyl glyoxal, also called MGO, which is an antibacterial. And the higher the level of MGO, the more antibacterial materials there are actually in the honey. And the flowers from the Manuka, the honey from the pollen of the Manuka flowers is particularly high in MGO. And so it is used and marketed as a medicinal honey. This did a couple of things. It kept the wound clean. It wicked out, again, materials and dead skin cells that we wanted to move away from her. We did continue to do the bandages at that point, and I was still doing a wet to dry dressing, but not as much saline. I wanted to have a little moisture there to make sure that the bandage was not sticking to her wound and that I could get it off. And I did change her dressings twice a day. And this went on for about a month. I'd say the last week I switched to a once a day dressing change, but we really took a lot of care of her. Over time, the musculature, some of that flesh simply desiccated. It began to flake off. And I was really curious to see what was going to happen with that open bone end. I was really concerned about that because I didn't want there to be any kind of an open bone end. So I was curious to see what her body would do with that. What was interesting was her body essentially flaked this bone end off, and then her skin grew over that bone end to encase it again so that there wouldn't be any open bone or any exposure of bone marrow. As the wound healed, it did skin over, and the skin had feather seeds in it so that she started to grow pin feathers and actually started to grow full feathers as she healed. And this is what she looked like at about the 3 to 3.5 week mark, where you can see that there's skin that has completely grown over that open humeral muscle. And the bone end is now completely encased and covered. The dressings, if you do this, you'll notice that the dressings, it's like they look dirty, but it's not dirt. It's dead skin cells that are sloughing off and that stick to the bandages. And that's actually exactly what you want to have happen. And then she is a happy girl again and very talkative and continues to lay eggs. So dressing wounds like this is a little bit intimidating, but chickens heal amazingly well. She was young, which I think made a big difference, and stubborn, which I think also made a big difference. She had lots of opinions about the whole process, and she continues to lay eggs and bop around and dominate her little coop to this day. So please ask questions about treating wounds. I'm happy to answer anything that I can in the chat on this Facebook post. And I also am the editor for our website, Community Chickens. That's www.communitychickens.com. Very happy to answer questions, and we have lots of useful articles there to help you take care of your chickens. Thanks for listening. I look forward to chatting with you.